The whisper of war there inside the command deck of the Vigilant Spark was cold and still, like the moment before a storm. Captain Lara Halden stood silently at the window, watching the stars stretch into darkness. Outside, the great void of space held 1,000 secrets, but none felt as heavy as the silence between her crew. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and forgotten by the galaxy that once promised unity. Earth had joined the Galactic Collective a generation ago, but it had never been truly accepted. Humans were considered weak, primitive, emotional. The great Empire of Zorath had mocked their technology. Their diplomats were ignored. Their scientists laughed out of halls of progress. And now, with Earth's colonies suddenly cut off by force fields of unknown origin, it was clear this wasn't an accident. The Empire was preparing something. And Earth's fleet, tiny and outdated, had moved to respond. But Lara knew the truth. This wasn't just about borders. It wasn't about resources or pride. This was about fear. The Empire feared something inside humanity, something even Lara didn't fully understand. She turned from the window, her boots echoing lightly on the steel floor. "Status?" she asked. "No response from Fleet Command," replied Lieutenant Urek, voice tight. "We're alone out here." Lara nodded slowly. It was what she expected. The fleet had splintered. Only a few ships had followed her orders. The rest, well, they feared the wrath of the Empire more than they trusted her plan. And the plan? It was built around one ship. The Arkos. A ship with no official record. A ship built in secret on one of the old lunar yards. It was created from the shattered pieces of forgotten war machines, stitched together with alien tech and something else, something human. It was alive in a way machines weren't supposed to be. And now it was their only hope. As she walked toward the halotable, she remembered the day she first saw it. Not the ship, but him. The boy who spoke to the ship like it was his friend. The boy who had no rank, no training, but who held the eyes of the machine like they belonged to him. His name was Silas. Was only 17 when she found him in the wreckage of the Uranus colony. The Empire had bombed it by mistake, so they claimed. But he survived, alone, trapped under rubble for 5 days. The rescue crew said he should have died. But Silas said the ship spoke to him. It told him how to breathe slower, how to slow his heart, how to call for help without moving. At first, Lara thought it was trauma or madness. But then, the ship responded to him. Systems that no engineer could crack began to move when he touched them. He whispered to the engines, and they roared. He cried once, and the lights dimmed as if in mourning. Now, he sat inside the Arkos, silent and strange. He didn't speak unless he had to. He didn't smile. But the ship listened. "Prepare for hypershift," Lara said. "Send coordinates to the Arkos." The crew hesitated. Urek cleared his throat. "Captain, with respect, if that ship jumps with us, we have no idea what happens. It hasn't been tested." Lara met his eyes. "Then we test it now. The Empire is moving. We move faster." The ship began to hum with energy. Lights flickered across the panels. Outside, the Arkos floated like a ghost black sleek, its surface shifting like water. It had no visible weapons, but its very presence felt heavy, unnatural. Lara stepped toward the intercom. "Silas," she said softly, "are you ready?" There was a long pause. Then a voice came back, calm, emotionless. "She's listening. She's ready." And then something strange happened. The stars twisted. The sensors screamed, and in one blink, the Arkos vanished without using the hypershift drive. Seconds later, the rest of the fleet jumped. When they arrived, the Empire was already waiting, dozens of cruisers lined in perfect formation. Their black hulls shimmered under the twin suns of the Branos system, and in the middle, the Empire's flagship, Wrath of Stars. They expected us, Urek said. Horror in his voice. Lara's eyes narrowed. No, she whispered. They expected us. They didn't expect her. A ripple of static passed through space. Then the Arkos reappeared between the Empire ships. But this time it wasn't silent. Its hull burned with lines of white light. Its shadow stretched impossibly far. And every sensor on every Imperial ship shut down at once. What is that? An enemy admiral said across the open channel. A new voice answered. It was Silas. But it wasn't. Silas. It was layered, ancient, filled with something too deep for language. You laughed, he said quietly. Now you remember. And every Imperial officer froze, because those words, those exact words, were from their oldest texts. From their forbidden's history, from before the Empire existed. Words that only one species had ever spoken in defiance: humans. The language of ghost silence swept across the battle space like a shadow. For a moment, no one breathed. Even the most battle-hardened Imperial commanders stared at the shimmering figure of the Arkos, unsure if they were witnessing a weapon or a warning. Aboard the Empire's flagship, the High Admiral's lips trembled as he leaned toward his comm officer. Trace that signal, he barked. That voice. How does it know the first tongue? But there was no answer, because the systems on every Imperial ship had failed radar. Comms, life support stabilizers, weapon locks, all dead. Only the emergency oxygen and manual lighting remained. And even those flickered like dying candles. Aboard the Vigilant Spark, Captain Lara Halden stood frozen. Her crew looked to her for answers, but she had none. Not yet. She reached for the comm. Silas. What just happened? His voice came through softly. Different this time. Not empty, but full of quiet power. She showed them her name. Lara. Blinked. Name? You mean the ship? No, Silas replied. The Arkos is what we called her, but she remembers her true name. It was taken, buried, but now she speaks it again. Lara looked at the star map. The Imperial fleet had stopped moving. Their ships floated in perfect formation, but lifeless, like statues. The Arkos hovered between them, glowing with a cold white light that moved along her surface like flowing. Ink. Lieutenant Urek whispered, What kind of tech is that? No one answered, because it wasn't just technology. It was memory. On the Empire's bridge. High Admiral Shavik stared at his powerless systems. His breathing grew heavy. He had once studied the ancient records, hidden away in vaults only the highest caste could enter. He knew the Forbidden's words. He knew what they meant. Humanity was wiped out, he muttered. Those words were erased. How does a child speak them now? He stood, rage overtaking fear. Charge the proton cores manually. We end this. Now, I want that ship turned to ash. His soldiers obeyed. They moved to the mechanical controls, the ancient backups, the last resort systems designed for battle in dead zones. But the moment they activated the weapons, every console melted. Not exploded, not sparked. Melted, as if someone had turned time forward just for the metal. The weapons turned to slag in. Their hands. And then a whisper echoed through their halls. Not through speakers. Through stone, through steel, through bone. Do not repeat your mistake. Aboard the Vigilant Spark, fear crept across the crew. Captain, said Urek, voice shaking. That ship? She just shut down 100 Imperial warships without firing. And now she's speaking to them. We need to know what. She is, comes Officer Jin, tapping his console. We need to know where she came from. Lara turned to her science officer. Get me everything we have on experimental Earth vessels. Black sites, classified shipyards. He shook his head. I already tried. There's nothing. That design doesn't match anything in the registry. Not human, not alien, not even theoretical. Lara's breath caught. Then she remembered. 5 years ago. A message from an old friend at the Europa research station. A whisper about an anomaly, a code buried in human DNA, something ancient, something that didn't evolve but was written. The message was deleted hours later. The friend disappeared. She had dismissed it as paranoia, but now it felt like a warning. Inside the Arkos, Silas sat alone in the core chamber. The walls pulsed with soft light, breathing in rhythm with his own. The floor beneath him vibrated like a heartbeat. Why did you show them? He asked quietly. The ship responded in his mind. Not with words, but with feelings, memory, sorrow, and a touch of something else. Forgiveness. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of being forgotten. Tired of watching those who claimed to be gods destroy those who remembered kindness. Silas closed his eyes. The ship had chosen him. Not because he was strong, not because he was brave, but because he listened, because he felt. And now she wanted to show the galaxy what humans had forgotten about themselves. On the Imperial flagship, High Admiral Shavik screamed into the void. He tried to order escape, retreat, self-destruct, but nothing worked. The ship was no longer his. A beam of pure light burst from the Arkos, but it didn't strike the flagship. It reached beyond it into the system's sun. And for one terrifying moment, the star dimmed. Not destroyed. Just dimmed. As if it too was listening. And every living being in that system felt the same thought. This is not your throne. This is a cradle. On every Imperial ship, the message repeated. A single line. Over and over. Words from the first tongue. Remember who watched you rise. Remember who held you when you crawled. Aboard the Vigilant Spark. Lara's knees buckled. They think they're the gods, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Urek looked at her. Then who are we? She smiled through the tears. Maybe we're the parents. And for the first time in her life, she understood why the galaxy feared humanity, not because they were violent, but because they had loved so deeply once that the stars still remembered. The ones who loved the stars first. For 3 long minutes, no one moved. The Empire's fleet stayed still, frozen not by weapons but by memory, a memory they didn't know they had. The Arkos floated quietly between them, not attacking, not defending, just being. Aboard the Vigilant Spark, Captain Lara Halden leaned forward on the edge of the command deck. Her heart beat slow and steady, but her mind raced. Open a channel to the Empire's fleet, she ordered. Lieutenant Urek hesitated. They won't respond. We don't need them to respond, Lara said. We just need them to listen. She waited for the signal to go green. Then she spoke, her voice low and calm. This is Captain Lara Halden of the human fleet. We are not your enemies. You came into our space. You laughed at our ships. You saw weakness in our words. But now you've seen her. And now you know Earth was never just another planet. Humanity was never just another species. She paused. We remember what you forgot, and we forgive what you fear. But we will not let you harm us again. The message ended. No reply. Just silence. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. Like the air before a storm breaks, or after a child stops crying. Inside the Arkos, Silas sat still, his fingers lightly brushing the control surface. The ship responded not to commands, but to feelings. She didn't need buttons or wires. She needed truth. And Silas had always been honest. Even when he was broken. He was 9 when the Empire's ships first flew over his home. They said it was just a patrol. They said they wouldn't interfere, but they lied. His sister didn't survive that day. The Empire called it a training. Accident. But Silas never forgot. And neither did the ship, because she had watched from the dark, sleeping, waiting, listening through the old satellites and long-dead probes. She heard the pain in his voice when he screamed into the void, and somehow she chose him. Not for revenge. But for healing, because humanity didn't need to destroy. They needed to remind, and that's what Silas was about to do. He looked into the core chamber. Energy flowed like water through crystal veins. And in that energy, he saw faces, not human. Not alien, but something older. Guardians of the galaxy before there were empires. Before there were borders. They looked like smoke and light, and yet they had eyes. Kind eyes, and in the center of it all Earth, but not as. It is now. As it was. Green. Wild, powerful. And loved. The Guardians had once walked there. They had held the first humans, watched them fall, helped them rise. And then they left, because humans asked them to, not out of pride. But out of love. So that they could grow on their own. Aboard the Empire's flagship. High Admiral Shavix felt his chest tighten. He stared at the data now slowly returning to his systems. But it wasn't battle data. It was history. His own ship was now showing him files from Forbidden's archives. Files only the Emperor could see. Files marked ancient threat. But they weren't about weapons. They were about humans. Pictures of stone, carvings on distant moons. Texts that matched the first tongue Silas spoke. Stories of a species that wept for others, that healed the sick of other worlds, that stopped wars with songs. Until one day they simply vanished. But now they were back, and the Empire didn't know whether to kneel or run. They're scared, Urich said quietly aboard the Vigilant Spark. Look at them. All their ships have powered down weapons. Some are even backing away. Lara nodded, watching the slow retreat. They should be scared, but not of us, of what they did, of what they forgot. Jin, the comms officer, turned toward her. Captain, what if this changes everything? Lara looked through the viewport at the Arkos, now glowing like a star. Then let it, she whispered, because this galaxy forgot what peace looked like. Maybe it needs to see the face of it again. A message blinked on their screen. Not from the Empire. From the Arkos. 4 words. We need to talk. Lara's eyes widened. Connect us. A moment later, Silas appeared on screen. His eyes looked older. Not tired, just full. She wants you to come aboard, he said softly. Leira hesitated. Why? Silas smiled faintly. Because there's something you need to see, something we need to remember. Lara took a long breath, then turned to Urich. You have the bridge. Then she left. As she stepped aboard the Arkos, she felt it immediately like walking into a dream. The walls pulsed with warmth. Not just light, but feeling. Memories brushed her skin. Voices not spoken but felt, and in the center chamber, she saw it. A great hologram of the galaxy. But not as it was now. As it had been. A network of light. Lines connecting every planet, every species, every soul, and at the heart of it, Earth. Not as ruler, but as home. And beside it, Silas stood. We weren't the first, he said, but we were something else. Lara nodded slowly. We were the ones who loved the stars first. The forgotten promise inside the Arkos. The air felt alive. Not just with breath or heat, but with memory. Captain Lara Halden had been aboard hundreds of ships in her lifetime, but nothing like this. The walls shimmered softly, reacting to her presence, not with cold metal sounds, but with warmth. It was like the ship recognized her. In the center chamber, the galaxy map spun slowly in the air, lines of light crisscrossing like veins in a living body. Silas stood silently beside it, his eyes fixed on a small blue dot pulsing in the center Earth. This was the promise, he said, his voice almost a whisper. Before the Empire, before the collective, before power made everyone forget, the promise was simple. Earth would care for the children of the stars. In return, the stars would remember Earth when she was alone. Lara stepped closer, trying to understand. You mean we were meant to protect the galaxy? No, Silas said gently. We were meant to guide it. Not with weapons, not with fear, but with something stronger. What could be stronger than fear in a galaxy? Like this? She asked. He turned to her. Grace, he said. Forgiveness, love, even when we were broken. Lara felt a chill run down her spine, because deep inside, she knew it was true. Aboard the Empire's fleet, things were changing. The wrath of stars, once feared across systems, now floated quietly like a wounded beast. Its weapons were cold. Its command was silent. And across its bridges, officers stared at their screens, not watching for targets, but reading history, images, voices they never knew existed, all being streamed into their ships by the Arkos. The Empire had worked hard to erase the past, to bury the truths that didn't serve its control. They told their citizens humans were latecomers, weak, desperate, but now the truth lit up. Their consoles like fire. Humans were not the last to rise. They were the first to lift others. And those who had been taught to hate now sat in silence, their beliefs cracking like glass under heat. On a small Imperial support ship, a young cadet named Velrin trembled as he watched an old recording. A human woman singing beside a dying alien elder. Not in battle, but in peace. The voice was soft, shaking, but full of emotion. The alien, a warrior, cried in silence and died with a smile. Velrin had never seen a death like that. He had always believed humans were dangerous because they fought unpredictably. Now he realized they were dangerous because they loved without reason. Back aboard the Vigilant Spark, Urek stared at his readouts. Captain, he said over the comms, we're getting a transmission from inside the Empire. Multiple signals. Some military, some civilian. They're asking for peace talks. Jin turned from his console. That's impossible. We didn't fire a single shot. Maybe that's why they're listening, Urek said. But the moment was cut short by a sudden alert. A new fleet had just entered the system. Not Empire. Not human, but something older. The sensors couldn't identify the tech. Ships shaped like crystal, gliding without engines. Colors shifting in patterns the computers couldn't explain. And then they spoke. Not in any known language. But in music. A deep, harmonic pulse that echoed through the system. Every ship received it. Every soul felt it. And the Arkos responded. Her lights dimmed. Her hull shifted. She sang back. And Silas smiled. They're here, he said. Lara stared at the hologram. Who? The Watchers, Silas whispered. The ones who left when we asked. The ones who kept the old promise. They heard our voice again, and they came. The new ships surrounded the system, not like enemies, but like guardians. No weapons. No threats. Just presence. A soft light flowed from them, touching the damaged systems of every Imperial ship and healing them. Metal reformed. Circuits glowed. Wounded officers felt pain ease. No words. Just mercy. On the Arkos, Lara stood beside Silas, her throat tight. Why now? She asked. Why return after so long? Silas didn't answer at first. Then he looked at her with quiet eyes. Because for the first time in 1,000 years, a human remembered what we're really here for. Lara didn't know what to say. So she closed her eyes and listened. And the galaxy, once divided by war and silence, sang again. In the Empire's high command chamber, far away, the Emperor himself watched it unfold. His face pale, his hands shaking. And then, for the first time in his life, He bowed, not out of fear, but out of awe, because even he now knew this wasn't the rise of a forgotten planet. This was the return of a forgotten heart. The heart that never stopped beating. Stars were quiet, but it was no longer the silence of fear. Now, it was the kind of stillness that came after hearing something sacred, like the final note of a song that refused to leave the soul. Aboard the vigilant spark, Captain Lara Halden returned from the Arkos. Changed. Her steps were slower, her face softer, but her eyes, they held something powerful now, not defiance, not pride. They held understanding. The crew watched her closely as she entered the bridge. Lieutenant Urek was the first to speak. Captain, we've received messages from 7 worlds under Imperial control. They're declaring neutrality. They say they don't want to be part of this war anymore. Comes Officer Jin added, and that's not all. A fleet from the Mockery Syndicate has just dropped out of warp. They're broadcasting one sentence. We stand with the ones who remember. Lara exhaled. Everything's changing. Yes, Urek said. But no one's firing. Lara turned toward the viewport. Out there, the crystal ships of the Watchers floated gently in a protective ring, humming low, almost like a lullaby. And at the center, still as a heart at rest, the Arkos. Then maybe, she said quietly, we can keep it that way. Inside the Arkos, Silas sat alone. The core chamber had changed since the Watchers arrived. The holograms had deepened, showing more than maps or records. They now displayed memories, some human, some not, faces of ancient beings smiling beside children, stars cradled in silver towers, planets flourishing without empires. It was not a history of conquest. It was a history of care. Silas touched the console, and the memories shifted to one moment, a little girl with dark hair standing by a small, flickering fire on a cold moon. She was feeding a wounded alien with trembling hands. The alien was old, sharp-clawed, and frightening to look at. But the girl smiled anyway. She didn't see a monster. She saw someone in pain. That little girl was his sister. She was gone now, but the galaxy hadn't forgotten her kindness, and neither had the ship. A soft chime echoed in the chamber. A voice followed. Not Silas. Not the ship. Someone new, requesting permission to board. The voice came from the Empire. Captain Lara received it first. Admiral Shavix is asking to speak with the one who commands the Arkos. Jin said, surprised. He's asking respectfully. Lara raised her eyebrows. The same man who once said humans were fit only to clean Empire boots? The same. Jin nodded. Double quotes granted, Lara said. A moment later, the High Admiral stood aboard the Arkos, his uniform torn, one arm in a brace. But his eyes were clear. And humble. Silas looked at him, but didn't rise. Why are you here? Silas asked. The Admiral didn't answer right away. He looked around the glowing chamber, at the strange light flowing like wind through the walls. Finally, he said, I came to see the truth with my own eyes. To know if the stories were real. To know if I was wrong. Silas nodded once. You were. The Admiral closed his eyes, and to everyone's surprise, he knelt. Not to a throne. Not to a weapon. But to a child. To a human. We feared your people, he whispered. Not because you were violent, but because you refused to become like us. We forgot that long ago you saved us from ourselves. Silas didn't speak. He simply walked forward and placed a hand on the Admiral's shoulder. Then remember now, he said. And choose better this time. Across the galaxy, word spread, not through networks, but through feeling. The Watchers sang into the stars, and the stars echoed back. Ships that once hunted now stood still. Leaders who once ruled with cruelty now asked questions they had never asked. Why are we afraid of the ones who never struck first? Why did we silence the voices that loved? And if Earth was not a threat, what was it really meant to be? On a distant colony world called Ezori Prime, a young alien boy sat on the floor beside his grandmother. He watched the news in silence, his large eyes wide. Images of the Arkos, of Silas, of the Watchers lighting up the skies like fireflies. He tugged on her sleeve. They said humans were dirty, he whispered. But that boy, he saved the sky. His grandmother smiled softly. They said the same things about us once, she said. Until a human girl held my hand and called me beautiful. What happened to her? He asked. The old woman looked to the stars. She never came back. But I think she's part of the sky now. Aboard the vigilant Spark, Lara watched as more fleets arrived, not for war, but to listen. The old alliances were cracking. Not in anger. In hope. And at the center of it all, one human boy. One ship. One memory that refused to die. The memory of love that asked for nothing and gave everything. When the galaxy listened, the galaxy had always been loud. Weapons screamed. Engines roared. Leaders shouted over one another to claim power, control, glory. But now, for the first time in generations, the galaxy listened. No war. No invasion. No burning. Skies. Just silence. And hope. Aboard the Arkos, Silas stood quietly at the edge of the core chamber. It no longer glowed with fire and energy. Now it pulsed like a heartbeat, calm and steady. Around him floated memories, some human, some alien, some too old to name. He wasn't alone anymore. Captain Lara Halden stood beside him. On the opposite side, High Admiral Shavix. Once enemies, now something else. Not friends, not yet, but students maybe. Both trying to understand the same impossible truth. The human heart had not vanished. It had simply waited. You understand. What comes next? Silas said quietly. Neither of them answered right away. Then Lara spoke. The world we knew is over. The Empire will never be the same. It shouldn't be, Silas replied. No, Shavix agreed, voice rough. It shouldn't, but some will resist. The old families. The war guilds. They won't surrender power without blood. Silas turned toward him. Then don't take it from them. What do you mean? Give them a choice. The Admiral's brow furrowed. They won't choose peace. Not right away, Silas admitted. But maybe they'll choose to listen. Across the Empire, the Watchers began to land, not to occupy. To heal. On burned-out moons. They planted light that grew into food within days. In cities torn by riots. Their ships played harmonic waves that calmed the mind and eased pain. And everywhere they went, they showed the same vision, a time long ago, when humans, not warriors or rulers, sat with broken civilizations and simply held their hands. No demands. No weapons. Just presence. And those who watched began to remember. On the distant trade world of Talmor 6, a council of 9 gathered to decide their future. They had always sided with the Empire. It was safe, powerful, predictable. But now they watched the sky as a Watcher ship descended without a sound. A child walked out of it. A human child holding a small seed in her hand. This is from Earth, she said simply. It grows food that never spoils. It listens when you're hungry. The council fell silent, not because of the gift, but because no one had asked for anything in return. No treaties, no taxes, no weapons. Just a child offering kindness. They voted within the hour. Talmor 6 left the Empire. And joined what the galaxy now called the Remembering. Back aboard the vigilant Spark, Lara watched the movement on the star charts. The old empires were crumbling, not in fire, but in awakening. Systems once silenced by fear were now speaking up. And it all came from one ship. And one boy. How did this happen? Yorick asked her as they watched the reports. Leira leaned on the console, eyes distant. Because when everyone else built armies, We built a boy who still knew how to care. He's just one person, Lara smiled softly. That's all it takes. Inside the Arkos, Silas stood before a great, rising structure made of light. A doorway, but not one that opened to space. It opened to memory. The Watchers stood behind him. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The ship had one final gift, a key buried in human blood for thousands of years. A message for the galaxy locked until someone finally remembered what it meant to be human. Silas placed his hand on the light, and the doorway opened. Not to a weapon. Not to power. But to a song. It filled the chamber. The ship, the skies, and every ear that could hear it. It was gentle. Fragile. Like a lullaby sung by someone who had lost everything, but still believed the morning would come. The song passed through stars. Through comm systems. Through bones. Across the entire galaxy. And it said one thing: you are not forgotten. You were never alone. You are still loved. On a battlefield that had not yet been touched, where old warships still waited for orders, the generals dropped their weapons. On a planet where orphans lived underground to hide from Empire patrols, the children came out into the light. And on the Empire's throne world, where the old Emperor watched from his dark tower, his knees gave out as the song reached him. He didn't cry. He simply whispered, "They were always the light." As the doorway faded, Silas turned to Lara and Shavix. He looked tired now. Not in body. But in spirit. "I showed them what they needed to see," he said. "Now it's up to you to build something better." Lara nodded. "And what about you?" Silas smiled faintly. "I think she's taking me home." The Arkos began to glow again. The Watchers gathered around her. And without a sound, she rose. Upward. Higher. Until she passed beyond the edge of all known stars. Returning to wherever the first fire began and the galaxy below. It didn't burn. It didn't fight. It listened, because one ship, one human, one truth had reminded them, before empires, before borders, before fear, we were the ones who held each other in the dark. Earth's voice in the stars had changed, not in how they burned or moved, but in how they felt. Across the galaxy, billions could sense it. A weight had lifted. A warmth had returned. Some didn't have the words for it, but they all knew. Something had been restored. Aboard the Vigilant Spark, Captain Lara Halden stood at the edge of the command deck, watching the empty space where the Arkos had vanished. Her heart ached, but it wasn't sorrow. It was something deeper. Longing. And gratitude. "Any new sign of them?" Yurik asked. Gently. Lara shook her head. "No trace. Not even radiation. It's like she never existed." "But the galaxy remembers," he said quietly. Lara turned, nodding. "Yes, and that's what matters." Weeks passed. The Empire did not fall in fire, but in reflection. Its leaders were forced to listen to their own people. Broadcasts of the Arkos' light song had been shared across every system, not just through tech but through memory. Many claimed they had seen dreams of Earth, of old humans they never knew. Faces smiling, hands reaching. Those dreams could not be explained, and yet they healed something broken. One by one, planets that had lived in fear stepped forward, not to fight but to rebuild. On the neutral world of Yeltsin Prime, a summit was held. For the first time in recorded history, every major race sent representatives. Not to argue, not to dominate. To learn. In the center of the Great Hall stood a single object, a stone taken from Earth's oldest temple, with words etched by hand. "We are not here to rule. We are here to remind." Lara was invited to speak. She didn't prepare a grand speech. No one expected one. She simply walked to the center, placed a hand on the stone, and looked at the faces watching her. Then she spoke. "We were mocked for being emotional, weak, too human. But now You've seen what that really means. It means we care when others stop. It means we remember when others forget. It means we forgive even when we are hurt. And it means we never leave someone behind no matter how dark the galaxy becomes. She paused. The hall was silent. Then she finished. If that makes us dangerous, then let the stars be warned. The heart of humanity has begun to beat again. No one clapped. They stood. Every representative. In silence. In unity. On a quiet moon. Where no war had ever touched, a garden began to bloom. The watchers had left behind seeds. They needed no light, no soil. They only needed hope. Children from every species played among the glowing trees, their laughter rising into the sky. And watching them, from a distance, stood a single boy. Silas. Not older. Not younger. Just still. The Arkos floated behind him like a shadow made of stars. He smiled as he watched the children laugh. Then he turned, walked back into the ship, and disappeared once more into the great beyond. Generations later, historians would write about the day the war ended not with a battle, but with a memory. They would speak of the Arkos, the impossible ship that carried the soul of a forgotten earth. They would speak of Silas, the boy who spoke the first tongue and reminded the galaxy what it meant to feel. But most of all, they would speak of what followed, a time not of peace but of listening. Where kindness was power. And memory was law. And the stars, once ruled by fear, now carried a different sound in the silence between them. A voice. Gentle. Eternal. Human.